Johnathan Taylor back in Indianapolis. Colts sign a couple of safeties, that and so much more. We'll talk about all of that with George Bremer today inside your training camp recap. George, I know you're hard at work. You've been down there at camp every day. Not a lot of off time in the off season, as we were talking about beforehand. But however, training camp's been interesting. And how's it been going so far, covering it for you on your end?
Yeah, I think it's always an interesting camp when you have a rookie quarterback, because really easy storylines every day for you. Yeah. Your eyes are always on number 5. You're always trying to see, that growth and what the next step's going to be for him. And it's not been, aside from the Johnathan Taylor situation, there's not been a lot of chaos. You've had the DeForest Buckner injury, but no one seems to be too up in arms over that. Shaq's been a nice comeback story. It's good to see him back out there. Fairly smooth camp. And I say that, and we'll see what happens this week. I probably just jinx the last week of this, but so far so good. It's been a newsy camp though too, and I think you never want a boring camp. I think you'd like a little less chaos than, say, luxury motor coaches pulling up during camp and running back meetings and that kind of stuff. But you also don't want nothing to happen. And I think it's been, to me, it's kind of flown by. I don't know what it's like for the fans, but for me, it's kind of said before we came on, pinch myself a little bit that there's only 3 days left in this training camp.
Yeah, I mean, and lots to talk about. Obviously, no one really expected how this Johnathan Taylor thing would kind of transpire. But that being said, we'd be remiss to not at least touch on it. He's back in Indianapolis. George, I don't really know what to make of this. I don't really know. I don't think there's light at the end of the tunnel. That's the hard part for me, and especially you. You're covering on a daily basis. But just your overall thoughts on where we're at, current events right now with Johnathan Taylor moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, this whole thing's been bizarre world, really, from the moment Jim Irsay's tweet went out about running backs on. It's just been, insanity. It's been a little bit quieter the last week or so, which is nice, but nothing's changed. I mean, you're still in the same situation they've been in for, 2 weeks now, 3 weeks now. Taylor wants a trade. They want him to play on the final year of his contract. Nobody really budging much on either side. Don't know really what's going to happen this week. Obviously, he's expected back in Westfield at some point, whether that's on the field practicing or whether it's like it was before, just sort of watching along with the running back group. We'll see. Hard to imagine his first actions back is going to be against the Bears. I mean, maybe, but that seems unlikely. At this point, honestly, I would think if and when he does decide to practice again, you figure you're going to wait another couple of weeks. I mean, next week's a short week. They're going to Philly. They're going to have that one practice over there, and they're going to play the game. You might as well wait till after that. Practice will be closed when they're back in the building. He can do whatever he needs to do behind closed doors that way. But, I think the one thing about this is there is a deadline ticking now. I mean, it's September 10th. And really, at some point, Taylor's going to decide what he wants to do. How far does he want to dig his heels in? I think the last week and a half has probably not been great for him in terms of speculation about that ankle, him going off site to get more treatment. None of that's going to help his market. If he wants to be traded or he wants a long-term deal, teams are going to be really leery with the ankle injury last year and with the uncertainty this year. So I think pretty soon he's going to make a decision. Does he want to get out on the field on September 10th, try to prove everybody that he's healthy, he can be the 2021 version of Johnathan Taylor again and set himself up in a position where there is a market? Or does he want to dig his heels in and, hold out an entire season? So there is a decision coming. I mean, we know that. Like, one way or another, he's either going to come back and, try to prove himself on the field yet again, or he's going to make this officially a holdout and, and then we'll see where it goes from there.
Yeah, I mean, at what point, obviously, George, Taylor and his camp, they've kind of drawn their line in the sand. I mean, they're very clear. They've, had trade requests as well as some public outbursts and back and forth with the owner of the football team. But at what point do the Indianapolis Colts and Chris Ballard say, listen, we've got to kind of draw our hard line in the sand as well. You're going to have to let us know one way or the other. Are you healthy? Can you play? Either or. At what point do the Colts kind of go to him and say, we got to have a decision, and then we make our determination based off of that final conversation. What do you do there?
For all we know, they may have already done it. I don't know. That may have already passed. But you've got to assume that it's coming soon. I mean, if he's going to be ready for week 1, probably that week after Philadelphia is about as late as you can wait. I mean, in all honesty, you got about 2 weeks. The way things are set up now, you get about 2 weeks of practice before that first regular season game. So that would be plenty of time for a veteran like him.
Yeah.
But, at that point, too, you want to have an idea of who your starting running back is going to be. Is it going to be Deion Jackson? Is it going to be Kenyon Drake? Are they going to bring somebody else in, from the outside? I would think that Monday after Philly is, in my mind, that would be kind of the cut, the deadline day if I'm in charge. If I'm Chris Ballard, that's where I want to know. Because at that point, you got that full week of practice, and then you've got a weekend off, and then you've got the full week of practice heading up to the opener with the Jaguars. And I would think you want your first team out. I kind of feel the same way about the quarterback situation. I don't know if they're going to make it public, but even from the QB situation, that Monday to me is when, if I'm Shane Steichen, I want to know who my starter is for Jacksonville. I just want that first team working together, those 2 solid weeks heading into the game.
Absolutely, man. Fascinating stuff with Johnathan Taylor. And as we know, it just continues to go around and around, and never any shortage of clicks when it comes to that. And just the news cycle with Johnathan Taylor is going to be that way until we get a result. Moving on and transitioning into the guy you mentioned earlier, the quarterback position, Anthony Richardson. Just your overall thoughts of the game and the way that he played against the Bills. George, I came away fairly encouraged. I thought he responded well early on. But that being said, just your general thoughts on Anthony Richardson and how he performed in that first outing.
Yeah, I think everybody was happy to see him bounce back after that early interception. In some ways, I think it was good for him. It was a big learning moment. He even said after the game that he felt like he probably should take the flag, in the future and not force a throw there because obviously it's better to have a 3rd and long than it is to have the interception and really set them up for a touchdown. But, I don't think it's a bad thing to get that out of the way right away, kind of have a hard lesson that's probably going to be probably going to stay in the back of his mind a lot more than if it had happened after maybe a couple touchdown throws and you feel like it's more of a fluke. When it's really the first thing that happens to you, it probably just leaves a little more of an impact. But I'm not surprised that he bounced back the way he did. Everything we've seen from him so far, this is a kid who's mentally tough. I mean, you don't know for sure until you get at least season under your belt because there's going to be a lot more that comes along worse than this. But, bad practices haven't affected him. Bad throws in practice haven't affected him. And now, the early interception hasn't affected him. He's a kid with, I think, the right amount of confidence. His work ethic has been outstanding. From all accounts, his demeanor in the huddle has been outstanding. His ability to pick up the offense has been outstanding. And, they've said all along, really from the moment they drafted him, that experience is what they're most concerned about. You get him out there in his first quarter of action. I'm sure there's throws he'd like to have back besides the interception. I'm sure there's plays other guys would like that. I'm sure Pierce would like to have that deep ball back. I'm sure Farrell Brown would like to have the holding call back, when you get down inside the 5. And I'm sure Matt Gay would like to have the field goal back. So, it's week 1. There's going to be problems. I mean, that's what week 1's for. I thought he held his own pretty well. Now you want to see him grow from that. I think that's always the big thing with Richardson is everything he does, it's always about the next stop, the next checkpoint. So get that first one out of the way. How does he build on that foundation? Not just against the Bears on Saturday, because honestly don't know how much we're going to see him. We'll see how they divvy all up the playing time, but especially on Wednesday and Thursday when they go out here and they have these joint practices and you get a lot of game-like reps. How does he respond back-to-back days like that? How does he respond to a defense that's going to be – I would imagine Matt Eberflus is going to want them to come in here and make a statement, right? I mean, He was defense coordinator here for however long. There's still some guys here that were here when he was here. I'm sure he's going to want to come in here and have a good showing. So it'll be interesting to see how Anthony continues to grow it. Honestly, I think it's going to be that way with him all year long. If he has a good day, you're going to want to see, can he replicate it? If he has a bad day, can he make up for it? I think we're going to be doing that all the way through January.
Yeah, I mean, like we've told listeners on this show, George, get on the roller coaster. It's going to be a ride all year long. You're going to have a lot of highs and a lot of lows, but that's just life in the NFL as a rookie. Speaking of the next game, and I know there's going to be some joint practices, so that might muddy up the situation. I'm of the mind, he had a game. I think you play him and start him in the second game. I don't want a guy to go out there and lose any confidence based off of his first performance. I think you maybe want to build a little bit of momentum. What's your thoughts just on how they're going to handle that? I know Shane Steichen, very close to the vest, doesn't really want to divulge a whole lot to the last second, but just your thoughts on the approach of maybe handling him as they go and progress through the preseason.
Yeah, it really depends now what Steichen wants to do. We've seen them rotate in practice who has the number one reps pretty much on a day-to-day basis. Is he going to do the same thing when it comes to these preseason games and throw Gardner Minshew out there against Chicago? Or does he, are the winds starting to turn in Richardson's direction? I will say, from what you heard after the game Saturday night, what you heard on Sunday, and then even today from Jim Bob Cooter and Ed Dodds, there it does seem like they were impressed with what they saw. Everybody who's talked so far seems to really like the way that he handled that. Now the question is, did they like it enough to give him another start, or are they going to keep this competition, pretty much wide open? The interesting thing for me is, Minshew got murdered on that first drive when he first came in there. Second team line did not have a great start. And I do wonder, is there some hesitancy about putting the rookie out there behind those twos? It's one thing to do it in the joint practices where he's got the red jersey on. It's another thing to do it, next Saturday night at Lucas Oil Stadium when it's, everything's live and no one's going to slow up and just play two-hand touch.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of that, the offensive line, I do believe the first team offensive line as a whole looked pretty good collectively in that short stint. That being said, are you a little bit surprised that Ballard hasn't at least entertained going out, and maybe bringing in a veteran? His words, not mine. I mean, he mentioned they weren't done yet, but they seem like they're done at this point, unless something changes in the next couple of weeks. Are you a little surprised that they haven't went out and got a veteran to really compete at that right guard position?
I have been honestly surprised with the way the offensive line unfolded the entire offseason. I thought there would be more competition brought in. I thought there would have been I honestly thought there would have been a couple of veterans signed back in March, to get to this point with really just rookies being added. It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. I think Blake Freeland did a decent job having to fill in for Braden Smith at right tackle. And, like you said, the first team line, by and large, did a pretty decent job. Concerning the short yardage situation again coming back up, it's just echoes of last year. I know there's going to be a different look for sure in the regular season. You've got to assume that they're going to use some sneaks in that situation with Richardson, similar to what they did in Philadelphia with Jalen Hurts. And there's no reason to even subject him to that in a preseason game. I understand that 100%. But my problem on it is just that's one of those moments where it just hat on hat, go out there, push the other guys back, and they couldn't get it done. Yeah. So that's a little bit concerning. I thought the pocket was pretty clean, though, for Richardson most of the time, certainly cleaner than the second team pocket was. And so it's stepped forward. We'll see where they go from here. You would think Will Fries is going to get pushed. I honestly was surprised that they didn't at least give a little bit of a push to Ryman. I know that they feel like he's made some steps forward, and I think he showed that a little bit on Saturday. But I'm still a little bit surprised that they didn't at least have a safety net there just in case.
Yeah, it's almost crazy. And I know a lot of times Ballard will wait all the way up to the final cuts and go out there and hit that waiver wire, which is definitely a possibility. But that being said, you would like to think, for a guy who preaches competition, that he would actually go out there and maybe create a little bit of that competition. So I would say if there's anything that's a little bit head scratching, because, you know better than I do, George, the war of attrition over the season, it's almost inevitable that those first five that go out there that very first series of the season are not going to last the whole season. You're going to need a guy, whether it be a play, a series, a game, or a stretch of games, to be able to go out there and play. And especially with a young quarterback, That is just really odd to me. So we'll have to see how that goes. Kind of moving over to the defense. Is there anybody on the defense from this past game that really stood out to you as far as, hey, I really liked what they brought in this game?
I thought Grant Stewart was really active. Seemed to be always around the ball. And I think he's a guy that seems to have been turning some heads in training camp as well. I know he was working with the ones for a little while. Looked like maybe he's even in that mix to be that strong side backer. Not that that's really used that much. It's really a 2 linebacker system these days. But, technically there's 3 starters there. And it looks like he's been pushing EJ Speed to try to be that 3rd starter. I thought he went out there. We knew what he could do on special teams, and he had a big special teams play as well. But I think he went out there on defense and really showed some awareness, showed some the toughness that we knew he had, and just sort of a little bit of a nose for the ball. I mean, he just seemed to be almost every play. It seemed like number 41 was involved somehow or another.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to not notice him with that hair flowing down. It's kind of a la Troy Polamalu out there. He's like a lightning bolt. He is downhill. I'll say that much. A special teams ace, you'd have to think he's going to make the team. A guy I'd be remiss to not talk about, Daryl Baker Jr., who's really been one of the brightest lights. Training camp, that kind of translated. He had a nice little pass breakup in this game. George, the more I think about it, I think Daryl Baker Jr. is going to win this starting job. I don't know who's going to get that other nod on the other side. Just your thoughts on Daryl Baker Jr. as you've been down there really every day for camp.
He's been doing this since the spring, and I think it's a great story. I mean, here's a guy – coaches talk all the time about next man up and, once you get your opportunity, seize the day. Daryl Baker's the embodiment of that right now. He's gone out here, really, like I said, since the spring and just been a consistent force out there. He's got the size and the physicality that they like at that position. He's not going to be perfect. We all know that. 2nd-year undrafted guy out of Georgia Southern. There's going to be ups and downs. But so far, he's shown, I think, among all the cornerbacks that have been out there competing who aren't Kenny Moore, that he's the guy at the top of the heap right now. And I think it would be a disservice. And now he's still got to finish this. There's still a couple more weeks left, and he's got to finish it off. But I think, if you're making that call right now, it'd be a disservice not to have him as one of the starters. I would say Dallas Flowers probably still has the edge on the other side for the time being, just because really Brents and Rush haven't been out there that much. Rush we know he's a ball hawk. He showed that right away. Right place, right time, and then really good run after the catch to get the pick 6. Brents, I think, is still working his way back into things, but it's good to see him get out there a little bit and get some game action. But yeah, I think right now that other spot is still kind of up for grabs. I don't know what basis you would have right now, barring a collapse over the last couple of weeks, not to put Daryl Baker Jr. in the starting lineup week 1.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those situations. You feel like he got the starting position. You got that nod with the number 1, and he's just not willing to let it go. He said, I've got an opportunity here, and I'm just not going to let this thing go. No one's going to beat me out. So good for Daryl Baker Jr. Transition over. We signed 2 safeties today. Ronnie Harrison Jr.'s got quite a bit of an experience. You even got, I believe, a past 2nd-round pick in Tease Tabor as well. Is that an indication of they're just worried about the depth, or more so that they're worried about some of these injuries turning out to be some more long-term types of injuries?
I think you've got to be worried about Julian Blackman a little bit. I mean, he hasn't really done anything in training camp with that hamstring. He's out there every day. He's very animated. I'm almost afraid he's going to re-injure it at times, how much he's into the defense every day. But, I think there's got to be a concern there. And then with Rodney Thomas also going down with a toe injury, even if that's short term, that's a lot. When you're looking at a position that wasn't that deep to start with, you lost Daniel Scott for the season before training camp even started. He was supposed to be in the mix. Blackman hasn't taken a snap at training camp. Now Rodney Thomas is on the shelf too. I think this is just a response to that. And I think in Harrison's case, they were missing that veteran voice. Rodney McLeod left, went to Cleveland. You're missing that veteran guy who can kind of step in, and it's a young secondary. We all know that. I mean, the corners are pretty much all either rookies or 2nd-year guys. None of them have played, on a high level for any amount of time. And so I think just having that voice, having that extra guy in the room, I think it's invaluable. And I think that's what Ronnie Harrison is here to do. Tabor feels like more of a, I hate to use the word reclamation, but it feels more along those lines. He was a corner when he came into the league, couldn't really stick there. Now he's kind of moving over to safety. We've seen that work out before. And we've seen guys, come late in their career here and do well. I mean, Mike Adams ended up being maybe one of the better free agent signings that they had at safety. And he was towards the end of his career, but it was on the upswing, caught him at the right time. So it'll be interesting to see if Tabor can make anything happen, kind of revive himself there. But there's definitely opportunity. I mean, you look again at Darrell Baker, follow his example. You've got the chance now and take advantage of it.
Exactly, man. You go out there and you get that. What a great story. I'm rooting for him. I mean, I'm already a Darrell Baker fan. I guess they call him DJ in the locker room, as Zaire Franklin corrected everyone there. So good for him as far as that goes. Before we hop off here, George, just an opportunity to just kind of talk about these joint practices and what that does for the team, what you've experienced with that, and then what you expect and what you need to see out of this next game in preseason game 2.
Yeah, I'll start with the bottom part of that first. I'm not really sure because usually you get these joint practices and you don't see much of the starters. So I doubt Justin Fields plays, for instance, on Saturday. I mean, I don't know why he would after they get 2 days of practice leading up to it. But the Colts only have 3 quarterbacks in camp, and one of them obviously is a rookie who they want to get as much time as they can out there. Does he get a little more than a quarter this time? Does he get a quarter again? Is it what you normally see from these joint practices, and he gets basically a series, and then Gardner Minshew gets a series, and then it's Sam Ellinger's show the rest of the way? I really don't know what to expect there. It's going to be interesting to see how Shane Steichen plays that. As far as the joint practices go, they're huge. I mean, there's a reason, even though all the fights continue to happen, that you see this becoming, prevalent throughout the league. You can control these environments a lot more than you can a preseason game. You can get the exact situations you want. If you feel like red zone's where you need the work, you can get X number of red zone snaps, negotiate that with the other team. You want third down work, you can get third down work, whatever it is, 2-minute drill, you can make sure it comes up instead of just hoping that you get into that situation in a game. So for Richardson, I think it's going to be particularly invaluable. You're going to get, for 2 days, a look at a defense that's not your own, that's going to be giving you different looks than you've had throughout training camp, different looks than you had in Buffalo. And I just think it's going to accelerate his learning curve because you're going to get a lot more stuff you will in the game, no matter how they decide to play the game. And it's going to be, again, in an environment where you feel more comfortable with him running the ball, doing some things you don't necessarily want to do as much in a preseason game. So I think it's going to be a really outstanding environment. It's going to be a packed house for both days. You've been out there a couple times already. You know what it's like when 6,500 fans get to full throat out there. I think there's going to be a decent number of Bears fans. I mean, they generally travel really well, and there's a lot of them in Central Indiana to begin with. So I think it's going to be a really game-like environment, as close as you can get to that without actually being, live on the field. And that any situation like that is just going to be incredibly important for Richardson.
Yeah, I mean, like you mentioned the word invaluable, and I couldn't agree more. I think he might even gain more out of these 2 joint practices than he will the actual game. A lot of things that they can really dial in and work on. Guys, if you haven't had a chance to join the No Horsing Around family, we encourage you to do that. Like, rate, review, share, and subscribe. Be a part of this. And if you guys have any comments, your thoughts on the second preseason game, joint practices, your feelings on Johnathan Taylor, hit us up in the comments. We always love the interaction from you guys. And George, as always, we look forward to seeing your next reading podcast. You're all over the radio. You're everywhere, man. You're busy. But thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to hop on tonight.
No problem, man. Anytime.
Absolutely. Guys, and as always, go Colts.